he came in Orange, Jason was the one reading the visual.
And he never came back.
Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Mary.
Mrs. Brew?
Here.
Mr. Kramer?
Here.
Mr. Meneghini?
Here.
Mr. Oja?
Here.
Mr. Pop?
Here.
I need a motion on the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion on the agenda. Support.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Meneghini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 9th, 2019. Closed session of September 9th, 2019. Do I have any questions? If not, I need a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve minutes of the regular meeting of September 9th, 2019, and the closed session of September 9th, 2019.
Support.
Mr. Meneghini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
We'll move on to the approval of manifest 2019-19. Scott, did you have any questions?
I have nothing for tonight.
Brett?
I have none.
Lee?
Yeah, I noticed here, Ray, there's 8 different places where it's mentioned, and the total extra cost is $1,200. This additional workers' comp premium per annum, annual, I'm not sure what that is. But it's listed in every department, and most of them have gone up. Like I said, it's up a total of $1,200. Is that because of certain
What they do
people
is,
getting hurt in certain
No.
departments?
they bill us at the beginning of their fiscal year on
Yeah,
estimates.
I remember that bill coming in.
Yeah, and then at the end of the year, we do a true-up as to what department was the money spent and where was the payroll spent. So we just kind of true up at the end of the year. Some departments probably get a credit because we overestimated, where others owe more because we underestimated. It's just they do an annual audit of our payroll each year, and then we charge it off accordingly.
I don't remember, this must be a yearly thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's all I have.
Jeremy?
Nothing.
I have a couple. On page 3 of 7, at the top, under major streets, it says total for department traffic service maintenance. What is that for, do you know?
Traffic service maintenance, that would be like your lighting, signs, traffic control.
And then my other question, one of them's on 5 of 7, wastewater, and I see it, I believe it's in 3 departments. A third share ignition SCADA, inductive automation. Is that, and I see it says something about software there for generators.
Yeah, that we split that between water and electric, so it's a third, wastewater, water, and electric, because they manage our SCADA.
So is that for the software for the SCADA then? 'Cause
Yeah,
I see
that
it
would,
says-
inductive automation is the software.
Okay. That's all I have. If I have no other questions, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve manifest 2019-19 in the amount of $298,876.42. Support.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Meneghini?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, if I could, we had a invoice that was pulled in the last meeting. I just want to give you a quick update.
Sure.
All right, that was a project we did down at the hydro, and Tim finally got a message from the company. It was something that a part of the equipment that needed to be replaced, and he gave the go-ahead, something that needed to happen. So I didn't get it in time, or didn't get it on this particular packet, so we'll have it at the next meeting.
Okay. Anyone wishing to address the council on an agenda item shall do so now at the podium. State your name and address for the record. Well, we're going to move on to public hearing. I need a motion to go into a public hearing.
Make a motion to go into public hearing.
Support.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Okay, at our last meeting, we brought to council a consideration for our Viacom television package, and council requested that we have a public hearing for this particular meeting to discuss the possibilities of what we're going to do with that agreement, ranging from status quo, move forward, or eliminating that particular package. We could eliminate it with no channel inclusions, additions, or we could consider some additional channels that would be similar in content, but independent. We call them independent, which is much cheaper than, or much more inexpensive than what we have. The channels in question are the music channels, MTV, CMT, and VH1, Nickelodeon, Paramount, TV Land, Comedy Central, and then, of course, the associated channels that are in our digital and HD section. Now, as from a content standpoint or from a cost standpoint, remember that this is a 5-year agreement. It's negotiated by the National Co-op, National Cable Co-op, the Television Co-op, which we're a member. They negotiate on our behalf, and we're a member because the NCTC represents small television companies like ourselves, where they provide a better, more competitive negotiation on our behalf. And the NCTC did finally come to an agreement with Viacom. It's a 5-year agreement, so if we decide to stay within the agreement or approve the agreement, then we would be with them for 5 years. A couple other notes. The particulars on this alignment is the cost in the extended basic and extended basic is roughly $7.36 per customer. That's our cost. And there's an additional $3 in the digital service, which would be about $10. As I pointed out, it's roughly about 8% of our subscriber fees. And as I pointed out also, that part of the consideration is that on an annual basis, we see anywhere from 8 to 12% increase across the board with all of our regular channels increases. So, that's what we're facing. This past spring, we did an extensive evaluation of where our rates were at versus what the subscriber fees, and we chose at that point, we recognized we had a substantial increase, but what we're charging our customers is basically what we're getting charged. So we have to directly pass on unless we subsidize through other means. So that's what's up for consideration tonight in a public hearing, to hear comment on these stations. There's, again, at our last meeting, we talked about, in fact, Mr. Corey Heigl was here, who we work closely with to help us with some of this, some of the market type aspects. They do quite a bit of research on their side with Packerland, or now Astria, and we appreciate all of the help he gives us. We have an excellent partnership with them, and they did some of the similar work in taking surveys, and they found that customers, on their end, they found that customers were more interested in saving the increase versus the actual channel. Then again, that's their survey. Of course, we didn't have a survey, but we do look at the market. Again, today I found out that NCTC also did a survey about 4 years ago, or the last 4 years. The number of cable companies are dropping the Viacom package for that savings and providing alternatives. and they saw a 1% drop over the entire nation from all of our fellow members. So that's just something to consider. I'm not advocating, I'm just putting fact that that's what they're seeing when they did their survey with the other co-ops. Again, that's something that council should consider, you know, when looking at how we want to present our viewing. So I can take questions, and then, of course, we want to hear from the public.
Did we get any responses in writing? Anybody drop any?
No. No, there was nothing that came in the office that I'm aware of, Mary. I don't think we
No.
had anything.
And I'm not aware of anything.
And I know this is kind of a quick turnaround for the public hearing and for information out there, but
We didn't have a choice.
we don't have a choice. I mean, we have to have a signature by the we have to have a decision by the end of September. There is an incentive that tomorrow is actually the last day for the incentive. It's kind of an early bird incentive, but they would not give me what the incentive was, which is kind of odd. I asked them if it reduced rates, and they said, oh yeah, you're going to pay a little bit less rate. And they wouldn't tell me what it was. They said, well, sign up and then you'll see what the incentive is. It's like, that's just a bit odd.
And for 5 years, you know, the rates are going to increase
Yeah.
from this point forward, and
Yeah.
we're locked in at that point.
Yes,
Yeah, the price is not locked in. That's what
There's an escalator in the contract.
yeah. Yeah, they have a pretty standard escalator, which is typically that 7 to 12%. I mean, it's a pretty decent escalator.
So for the basic customer, their TV would go up $7.36.
No, that's what we pay right now.
Okay.
And, you know, we would anticipate that through the rest of the package, it's going to be about an 8 to 12% increase. So, you know, one of the options was that if we can eliminate 8% off of our cost today, on January 1st is when we get most of our increases, that we would be able to hold our rate through 2020 and then reevaluate it on January 1st, 2021. So that's the major consideration, is that we would be able to absorb any of the other rate increases by not having this package.
Okay, so we're paying $7.36 now for that package, right?
Per person, yes.
person?
Per subscriber.
So what is about the price that it would go up?
Well, we don't know. I mean, they didn't,
They didn't say.
Corey, did you have any of that information?
I don't have it with me, but they should have presented an escalator, as Julian pointed out, each year what it would go to. I don't have that on my fingertips.
No.
Safe to say it's going to go up that 12% every year.
Probably around 8 to 12%.
That's the pattern that happens, especially across the board.
And if we sign into this and that's all they would do is a 5-year agreement, right?
Yes.
You wouldn't do a year by year or
No.
even a 2-year agreement on it?
No, it's a 5-year agreement. It's a 5-year package. I think the last one was 4 years, wasn't it? Yeah.
What about our other channels? Are they on that long of an agreement?
Well, they have different agreements. They all have escalators within the agreements. So we experience that. It's not really random until they negotiate extended contracts. And they're all different, so.
Okay.
Next year, you're going to be forced to come to terms with NBC Universal, which is about 20 channels, give or take. So it's another tough conversation on how you're going to do that. Much more popular content is viewership and subscribe.
Does council have any more comments or questions?
I got a comment. I mean, we have to hold our costs, there's no question about that. And if we can't give our customers a good value and service, we shouldn't be in the business. So I think this is one way of going here where we can hopefully hold it for at least a year, maybe more. But the one thing I won't say it irks me, but in the write-up here from Vicom, or, where we go here? from Packerland, or Astria now, is that right, Astria? The rationale is that they performed a survey, and the majority of the respondents did not view these channels as a priority. Only 1% of their customers said they would drop service if they lose one of the channels owned by Viacom. The surveys were taken from Astria customers in small market communities of similar size and demographics as Norway. Well, I have to agree with that, because I don't think there's another city out there that's quite like Norway. That's my only complaint. Not saying if it's good or bad, just saying there's nobody else out there like us.
I agree that I think we do need to drop it, but I'd like to see us investigate some kind of low-cost alternatives for at least a couple of the channels. I'm not saying replace all 15, replace one or two of the more popular ones out of there with something if we can. That's where I'd like to see it go.
I agree. Especially like the children's networks or on that line, I'd like to see them try to replace them channels with another station of value.
Isn't that that's what Astra is doing at this point? Yeah.
We're not replacing all the channels that Jerry suggested, but there's a handful, I think Chris Long from my office shared with you, comparative channels that we're going to be replacing. So ITV's comparator, Nickelodeon's comparator, so something with similar content.
The ones for me would be like Nickelodeon and something like TV Land if we could. Either get MeTV to work better. I don't know how it's working now because I currently don't have cable at this point, but, so I don't know how that's working, but we've had issues in the past. If we can get that one working better or something similar.
I think we looked at that MeTV, Jeremy, I'm not sure if you were on here then, but that was kind of out of our control. I don't think it was our control, right? Ray, do you remember when we looked at that?
There was-
MeTV?
No, we had to take that particular channel off air, and the station's out of Marquette, and their equipment is,
Right, I remember that. They couldn't deliver it to us.
They can't
but
deliver it.
Something along that line of a
Yeah.
TV or something like that to replace the TV.
there are alternatives that have similar programming, so we'll be able to look at that.
Do we have any public participation? No?
Anyone want to come up and talk about the TV?
All right. Is there any other comments or questions, or do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we go out of public hearing, back in regular session. Support.
Mrs. Brew,
Yes?
Mr. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Menegini.
Yes.
Mr. Oja,
Yes.
Mr. Pop.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do I have a motion on the Viacom video agreement?
In the recommendation, it says channels not to be replaced. I don't think I'd like to see that in the motion. I think we should still inquire or look at changing a couple of them channels. So to say that they shouldn't be replaced, I think we should take that out of the motion.
I have like number 2 on the list of options.
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we drop Viacom and replace with a couple of low-cost alternatives and keep the rates stable through 2020 and review in 2021.
Support.
Mr. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Menegini.
Yes.
Mr. Oja,
Yes.
Mr. Pop,
Yes.
Mrs. Brew.
Yes. Move on to approval Communications Department Astria Contract Amendment Number 2.
Okay, this particular agenda item came up at the last meeting, and we had not included the addendum, the actual addendum number 2. It deals with the digital cable transport and hosting services. We do have that addendum for you tonight and for your consideration.
Do I have any questions or comments on the agreement? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that the digital cable transport and hosting services addendum number 2 be approved.
Support.
Mr. Menegini,
Yes.
Mr. Oja,
Yes.
Mr. Pop,
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Move on to approval, band shell electrical upgrades.
Okay, this particular item, agenda item, came up about a month ago as the Music in the Park program was wrapping up, and our city band program wrapping up. We had a major request from the organizers to really look at our band shell electrical. They were having a hard time with the electric equipment for grounding and for electrical. It was undersized. It's not appropriate for the new equipment. And we also got a request through Leif Erikson that we typically put our skid out there once a year, but they're through these other programs at the band shell site, we're getting more vendors, more power needs, and so again, looked at not only the band shell, but bringing out, better electrical connectivity. So we went out and solicited local electric contractors in the area, and actually had them come in, and we walked through what we needed to do. Not a specific engineered RFP, but we did pick their brains on what that would look like. We did end up with an apples to apples of what the upgrade would look like, and we had them price that particular upgrade. We then brought the proposals to the DDA at our last meeting. One of the reasons why we're pushing this forward is that if we moved on it now, then we could have at least the electrical out into the facility available for Leif Erikson, and that was basically a big request. So the DDA evaluated it, and they did approve moving forward. G. Brooks Electric out of Kingsford had the low bid at $9,000, but the DDA did request that we bring this to council to this meeting and just see if the council would be willing to pay one half of that amount, kind of a good faith request. But they were prepared. They are prepared to move forward with the whole project. So I'm open for questions.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. I also was at this meeting, and the reason they did go ahead with the whole amount is because if they didn't go ahead with it and tell them, it wouldn't have got done for Leif Erikson Day. Otherwise, they would have held off and waited to see what the council did. And if anybody has any questions of me about that meeting, please feel free to ask me.
Well, there's no question that it did need the upgrading. However, they said they would like council consideration to contribute 50% of the project. I have given it consideration, and I'm dead set against it. And thank you, DDA.
Was this a budgeted item?
This is not a budgeted item for us, and they have the financial wherewithal to take on. That's going to be an amended budget for them.
But also budgeted for them wasn't the salt shed either.
Right.
I mean, which has nothing to do with this, but. Okay. Any other questions?
I think the band shell's been utilized very well in the last couple of years. I mean, it brings people to downtown. I'm in favor of it.
I'm also in favor of it just because, I mean, really, this last summer, I mean, I could not believe the people we had down here.
It was very busy.
There was, yeah, and it's awesome to see that band shell being used. And I feel like we need the right electrical. I know they've had problems, not only in the band shell, but outside. The vendors trying to sell stuff and it's popping circuits and different things. And I think it's something that needs to be upgraded.
There's no question it needed the upgrading. I caught most of their programs all summer long, and it definitely was an issue. And then again with Leif Erikson coming up, I'm against giving them half the money for it.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that the city approve $4,500 towards the band shell electrical upgrade project.
Support.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
No.
Anyone wishing to address the council on any item of interest shall do so at the podium. State your name and address for the record.
John Wagner, I live at 719 Stevenson Street. I watched your council meeting on channel Sunday, and was quite concerned about our individual that came here and expressed his concern about the city of Norway spending money at the Dixie County Fairgrounds. First of all, he needs to get his information correct. The city authorized primary work to be replaced. They did that. The fair board was taking care of the secondary. At a cost of $96,000. So that was our cost. So if you upgrade any other service on anybody's facility, you guys bring in the primary, you're the provider, and secondary is the responsibility of the owner. So I feel that he was wrong. He said we have meters hanging out there, meter sockets for future expansion. We just removed 35 meters. We don't want to put more in because there's a cost there now. When those meters were put in, there was no cost associated with the meter hanging there. And a while back, council decided that there was a service fee to be applied to that, which is understandable. And when you have 35 of them, you add that up, it's quite expensive. So that was our goal. We wanted to reduce that. It was in dire need of repair. Nothing's been done to that since probably the 30s. So it was very concerning to me that he was spawning off and not getting his facts correct. And I was really concerned how he reacted to the council when he was a past council member, and he had no courtesy for the council at all. So I think people have to understand that if you're going to address the board, get your facts correct and address the council with respect. So that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you,
Thank you,
John.
John.
Anyone else like to address the council? We'll move on to mayor and council comments. Scott?
I have nothing for tonight.
I have none.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay. I do have a few comments, which would go after Mr. Degner's comments. Mr. Bubbalani had a lot of questions at the last meeting. I wish he was here tonight, because we don't always have the answers when people bring them to me, because obviously we don't know what we're going to be asked. You know, he asked about the fairgrounds, and, you know, I look back and, you know, Mr. Bubbalani also voted in 2008 to do upgrades to the campground, which he voted for projects out there. So he should understand that. And to go to the lines, I want to say it was an upgrade to our system that we own. The fairgrounds took on the secondary, so it'd be no different than going out to, say, Circle Drive and upgrading it. The fairgrounds are our lines and our responsibilities. So that's why the upgrade was done. It wasn't personally done for the fairgrounds, it was to our system. And then Mr. Bubbalani had some facts out there, you know, about the debt. And we do have debt, and I'm gonna let Mr. Anderson, you know, talk about the debt and answer them questions, but I just want people to know, this debt didn't happen overnight. You know, I'm getting stopped on the street, and people are asking me, you know, like, it's the people that all sat here, we incurred all this debt. This debt has been around for a long time. Especially, people don't understand the pension debt, because that is out of our hands. So, and, you know, I think Mr. Babalani should understand that, because he's sat here in this seat for 3 different terms, he sat here. And when he was on here, without, not including the pension, he voted for $19.7 million in debt. So he should understand, when we do upgrades and that is a debt, but we gotta keep our systems going. And I would like people to know, as the council sits here today, we've been on here for almost 2 years in November, and I'm very proud to say, we did not add anything to the city's debt. And one other thing, as far as, you know, all different municipalities have different kind of debt when you gotta upgrade. And you do get graded on this. And I want people to know our bond rating in our electric and our general fund is an A+. And an A+ is the best you can get. So people need to understand what the debt is, what it means, how we upgrade. The pension, you talk to other municipalities that have the pension we have, they're running into the same problems. They're not paying back the percentage of what was promised. So that's why we get the debt, and we did councils prior to any of us, I'm not sure if Lee was here, you know, voted on, you know, maybe some people retiring too early, that happened, so that didn't help either. And that's all I got to say. Mr. Anderson?
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I will take a few minutes here to add some additional information. Again, it's always appreciative when we have the opportunity to go in and make sure that we have all the facts that go out to the public. And we take this opportunity now to present those. As the Mayor mentioned, you know, our total debt is $34.6 million, and that is a sizable number, no question about it. Out of that, about 36% of that, $12.4 million, is the pension debt. And majority of the decisions and the impacts in the contracts were done prior to 2000 in previous contracts. And that's, you know, that's negotiating between the employees and the councils, previous councils. At that time, you know, we weren't in the pension issue, and so, you know, it's hard to put yourself in their seat when they're making those decisions. But, you know, fast forward, you know, we're in this position. So that's about just shy of 36% of the debt. Keeping that into consideration, the remaining debt, just shy of 60% is utility related. They're done, those utility debt factors are done through traditional revenue bonds or rural development, like in water and sewer, we do rural development bonds, but that's still a revenue bond generated type debt. And as I explained in the last meeting, you know, there's a philosophy when you look at financing, and you know, I don't want to minimize debt. Debt is debt, but you do look at it personally as good debt versus bad debt. You know, I don't know too many people with a mortgage that really consider a mortgage a terrible debt. You know, if you want to own a house and you can afford the payments and you get decent rates, you go in a 30-year mortgage, and so that you can live in the house. And then utilities are very similar, because what happens is that, you know, you have one or two philosophies. You either save the money, and you have to put extra money aside, which the ratepayers are going to pay for the extra money you put aside. There's no way of getting around it. Okay, so if you have a capital improvements fund that you're putting money aside, which we all do, even with looking at financing projects, we still have capital improvements funds for projects that don't meet the level, the size that you would go out for bonding and actually finance. But if you don't finance any of your projects, especially projects that run anywhere from $2.5 to $10 million, what happens is that we put that money aside, costs are escalating on project costs, you put that money aside, and the people that are paying for it, the ratepayers that are paying for that debt, will never see the project. They'll, it could be 30 years, 20 years before you have a substantial amount of money that you can handle these projects. So the idea is that you finance through revenue bonds and through the rural development, in our case, because we're a small community and we qualify, and you finance that debt, and the current ratepayers, they'll pay a very similar amount to what you'd be paying without the project for a capital improvements fund. You pay now to help finance that debt. We can get rates anywhere from 2.5, 2.125, maybe on different kinds of markets, we see high as maybe 3.25. But how many would take a 2.5% mortgage, for 30 years? And our utility debts, it depends on the type of project. Road projects, your asset is only 15 years. So if you did a bonding for roads, which not a big fan of bonding for roads, just because the asset value is only about 15 years. Okay, but if you have to, you have to. I mean, if you just don't have the road funding for it, then you have to evaluate it. But when you're talking about water and sewer, water bonds are 40 years. Our electric bonds are 20 plus, 20, 25 years. Those are based on the asset values of our utility, and quite frankly, our assets go beyond the 20, 25. Sewer and water assets go to 80 years, 60 to 80 years. So you do get, I think the ratepayers do get a very fair value, especially as a young ratepayer. You're now taking advantage and being able to utilize the upgrade. Whereas if you were putting money aside and you're not paying, you're not getting the value, but you're still paying into the capital improvements fund, and we never hold the project. So, those, from a utility standpoint, it's hard pressed to evaluate that and say it's bad debt. When we look at the utilities broken down, 23% of that $20 million that we have in utility-related debt, or the 60%, is in the electric fund. Well, and a good chunk of that is in the hydro. Most of it's the hydro. But yet that hydro, again, is what also helps keep our electric rates down, because we can produce anywhere from 85 to 95% of our own power. We go out and buy it on the grid. Instead of paying 13.5 cents a kilowatt, you'd be paying 18, 19, 20 cents a kilowatt. So that hydro is a tremendous value to the ratepayers. Again, water's at 14% or 4.8 million. Wastewater, 6.8 million or 19.8%. And then our cable, we have $1 million debt in the cable, but it's roughly just under 3% of the debt, of the total, of the utility debt. Where I think it's disingenuous in the conversation at the last meeting was talking about taxpayers. Taxpayers don't pay utility debt. Ratepayers pay utility debt. Taxpayers don't pay utility debt. Okay, so that is a fact. And in the taxpayer side, we do have some bond issues, the city hall, the fire hall, the DDA with the streetscape, and then we have some voter approved. But the total of the taxpayers is 4.6%. So general fund is 1.8%. It's just $600,000. DDA, $780,000 is 2.2%. And then the voter approved is $197,000. It's 0.57%. So when you look at, if you're talking about taxpayers, the amount of debt that we carry outside of the pension debt, which, you have to add that to the taxpayers as well, because we all are in this for the pension, but straight project debt, it's only 4.6% total across the board for the taxpayers. So, I think one of the things to watch and to listen to is, outside observations when you're dealing with the fiscal health of the city. We'll give you the facts, but we'll leave it to our auditor who comes in and gives us a quote-unquote unqualified audit position, fiscal position. Unqualified means it's the best that he can give, that from an auditor standpoint. And so we've asked him that year in and year out, and I think we've made improvements. When he first started, I think Councilmember McGinney has asked that question, I think, every year, scale 1 to 10, and I think it's gone up. So that is, from the auditor standpoint, we don't get any backlash. And he is very thorough. Mary and I go through with him. We're going to have an exit interview coming up here shortly, and he'll be in front of council again shortly. And again, he can ask that question. And again, I think he's been very fair in his evaluations of us. He's not going to hold back if he's critical, and I think he's very fair in that. The biggest, though, is what the mayor mentioned. A few years ago, about 3 years ago or so, we had to, we refinanced our original electrical debt, and we had to make some additional upgrades at the hydro. And in doing that, we actually got a bond rating. That bond rating is an A+. We came out with an A+ bond rating. We asked the question, why not AAA? I mean, AAA is the best. And they said, you cannot get anything better than an A+, based on the size of organization, the size and demographics of the community, and they had a whole series of factors. And they said that is the best that you can get based on those factors. Then we also had, at the same time, our general fund got bond rated. And we got an A+ on the bond rating on the general fund. So these are nationally ranked bonding agents, and they gave us an A+ rating in both. And so we're proud of that. We want to maintain that. We maintain that bond rating. I feel bad for Mary when that call comes in, because they ask for a lot of information. And it really puts a high stress load in her office, but she does a fantastic job of getting them the information, and we maintain those. So I just want to make sure that's out there for the public. I think it's important, especially when we have questions. I know it may be frustrating if you come up and you ask questions, you citizen comments, 3 minutes, and you ask those questions. We don't have the answers. It's better for us not to give them something that's questionable or maybe not accurate. It's best for us to go back in, get the information, and come back out like we're doing tonight. And so we're very appreciative that we have this opportunity to mention that. One last thing, and I don't want to go back and dwell on the fairgrounds, but we have an excellent working relationship with the Fair Board and the fairgrounds. It is a tremendous asset to the community. I think a lot of people look at it as a Norway area fair, as opposed to the Dickinson County Fair. They come to Norway, and we're quite proud of that. With that being said, we've always had tough talks with the Fair Board, and we appreciate that openness and that discussion level. And when you have areas where you disagree, we're able to work through those. I think, the primary in that facility needed to be replaced, and we did it. And we got that, from a safety standpoint, we've got that done this year. Over the years, there were a lot of meters put in out there, but I think the Fair Board has done a yeoman's job over the last couple of years of recognizing that they can't piecemeal projects. They have to go in. $96,000 is a big chunk for the Fair Board. So what was happening was they'd come in and they'd add a building, they'd add a power need, and we'd have to come off with a line off the primary, which is a secondary line, and then we have to add a meter, because we didn't have a primary meter out at the fairgrounds. So it is true to say that, it's really a good business for us to have all 35 meters out there with the meter charges. But when we deal with every one of our customers, especially our commercial and industrial customers, we're not out there to try and add costs to the business. We want the business to stay and thrive. So we look at opportunities for businesses to save money, and the Fair Board, they said, hey, we've got to fix all of the secondaries that we have running, which means eliminating these meters and getting them into a primary metered system. And that's what we added. We added that primary meter. And I think that's down the road, that's going to be very beneficial for the community. We charged what was appropriate to charge. Again, you heard from Mr. Degner, and $96,000, that is a chunk of a project for someone for the group to take on in 1 year. And I think, again, they did a fantastic job this summer to get that job done. The contractors did a great job, and of course, as always, our electric employees really did a fantastic job out there to get that project done. The fairground, or the RV park, that was brought up. Don't want to belabor again the fairgrounds issue, but that was brought up in 2008, December 2008, brought to the city, and a request from a resident that, through the fair board, that, they wanted to have horse shows out at the fairgrounds. And the only way they could do it was to have a camping facility. And so, that project was approved. The fair board did pay for all of the materials in that project. The city, it was brought to the city council in January of '09, and the council did approve to provide labor and equipment for that job. And that was done. It was a successful project, and I think it's added to the experience out at the fairgrounds, and the city did, get reimbursed for all the materials on that job. And so I wanted to make sure that that was out there. And, that question was specifically asked, so I wanted to specifically answer it. There's additional information that I'll leave at this point on some of the individuals involved, but can always, if that question comes up in the future, we can always readdress that. So I can take any questions if you guys have any questions, but I wanted to make sure that was. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Mr. Anderson?
When you say utility-related debt, just so it's clear, that is infrastructure upgrade.
That is correct. That is.
That's upgrading the water lines, the electrical lines, cable lines. It's infrastructure upgrade.
Electric, water, wastewater, and cable.
Yes.
The voter approved for road work, so that's part of the voter approved.
Yes.
And we don't have a bond issue in our major and local streets. So we're trying to use the monies that we have on an annual basis and try to put money aside, but it's just so hard. Like, we went through budget hearings. It's just so hard to put money aside in the street funds. So we try to do what we can on the streets. I do have one more shout out. On Sunday, the Norway, the trail group, the Dickinson Trail Network, they held a cookout out at Marion Park for opening. Again, they made the connection between Marion Park and the school property, and then ultimately down to Pierce Gorge. It's a nice event, and I want to give a shout out to those folks. They do a tremendous job in asset for the community. They work very hard, and they're continuing to work. So there'll be more in the future.
I need a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make a motion to go into a closed session for employee evaluation of Mr. Anderson.
Support.
Just so everybody knows, we'll be going into closed session. We will not be coming out and voting on anything. After that, we'll just be coming out to adjourn.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Meneghetti?
Yes.
Mr. Oja?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes. And just I want to state that it was at Mr. Anderson's request for closed session.
Yes.